So now we turn to defenses, and this is kind of key for whether or not you are a holder or a holder in due course. And defenses, we've talked about defenses and other topics. Defenses can bar the collection from persons who would otherwise be primarily or secondarily liable on an instrument. So those folks who might be liable might be able to raise a defense. We have two categories: universal or real, sometimes they're called real defenses, and personal defense. The universal defense is a defense that can be used to avoid payment to all holders of a negotiable instrument, including a holder in due course. So this would apply to both. And that's if we have a forgery of a signature on the instrument. When an instrument has forged the person's name, as we talked about, the forger would become liable, but the person's name who is forged has no liability to pay the holder or the holder in due course. So, for example, X forges M's signature on a note and sells it to P. P cannot collect from M whether she's a holder in due course or not. Who might she have a recourse against? That would be X, the forger. If we have fraud in the execution, this is a person is deceived into signing a negotiable instrument, different from the imposter rule. This is a person's deceived into signing a negotiable instrument where the signer, the one signing, believes she's signing something else, not a negotiable instrument, like, oh, here, sign this receipt for us, and then they go to sign it, but it's really a negotiable instrument. That's what fraud in the execution means. But that won't apply if the person signing should have known better. Material alteration to the instrument, that's going to change the contract terms between any two parties in either way. The change in interest rate, the amounts, days. For example, Parks negotiates a $200 negotiable note to Jim. Jim changes the amount to $500 and transfers it to Mark for $500, who qualifies to be a holder in due course. What can Mark collect from Parks? Only $200. If there's a discharge in bankruptcy, you don't owe it. It settles the insolvent debts. Minority or infancy, when a minor can disaffirm under state contract law if they're involved in any transfer or being the drawer or the drawee or preparing the note. Any illegality, if it's illegal or there's a mental incapacity or extreme distress, the document was issued under any of those conditions and state law makes it void, then it's going to make it a void across the board. And then we have personal defenses. And this is a defense that can be used to avoid payment to an ordinary holder of a negotiable instrument, but not a holder in due course. And this is the biggie. And these are the defenses that the holder takes subject to the transfer of the negotiable instrument, like the assignee. The holder in due course is not subject to these defenses, and most of them are from our common law contract defenses. And you're going to see a couple repeats here, and I'll explain the difference. So let me give you the example. The big one, I've been taking this one right through the whole section here of negotiable instruments. Dobbs negotiates a note to Mary in payment for a stereo. Mary negotiates this note to Art, who qualifies as a holder in due course. When Art seeks payment, I do not have this example up here. I apologize. When Art seeks payment from Dobbs, Dobbs points out that Mary breached the contract by never delivering the stereo. What's the result? Can Art still collect from Dobbs? And as a holder in due course, the answer is yes, because this defense of breach of contract is personal to Dobbs and Mary. It has nothing to do with Art and Dobbs. So Dobbs' only recourse is to sue Mary for breach of contract, but Dobbs still has to pay Art. And what does this example remind you of? Are Bob and the apples with Nora and her $5. So the bottom line is, can Pat collect from Nora? And Pat in that example was a holder in due course. And Nora's claim is for breach of contract against Bob. So Pat can collect from Nora. And Nora's only recourse is to go after Bob. But as a holder in due course, Pat's entitled to collect from Nora despite Bob's breach. So that's how important the holder in due course status is, that you avoid these contract defenses. It's the whole point when you're transferring negotiable instruments. Fraud in the inducement, ordinary fraud. This is making false statements to induce someone to make a negotiable instrument. Very similar to our imposter. And then you see again the illegality, the mental capacity, or the ordinary distress, and I should put infancy in this category too. You saw it up at the universal defenses. The difference is if state law makes the transaction voidable, then it's a personal defense, and the holder in due course can collect. But if the state law makes it completely void, then it's void to everybody. I am not going to test you on that little fine point. You just need to know that there's personal defenses and universal defenses, and what makes those two different. I.e., the holder in due course still gets to take their payment despite there being a defense under the personal defenses. Previous payment, the maker of a negotiable note pays on the note but does not keep or cancel the note, and a subsequent party who qualifies as a holder in due course seeks to collect on the same note, then they must pay the holder in due course, and then their recourse is against the person they paid. A lack or a failure of consideration. If you have let's say there's a gift that says, I promise to pay you $100,000, and it's due on demand. There's no consideration with a gift, right? I give you a check. It's a gift for your birthday. It's $100,000, but then you transfer it to a holder in due course. And the question is that payable? And the answer is yes. So those gift negotiable instruments can ultimately be transferred and create a holder in due course. Non-delivery, M issues a note that is a bearer paper, payable to a bearer or cash. It's stolen by T. T sells it to a holder in due course. Can the holder in due course collect? Yes. And now we're on the shelter rule. And that provides that a transferee of an instrument acquires the same rights that the transferor had. So even if the initial person isn't a holder in due course, if the transfer, if there is a negotiable instrument from a holder to a holder in due course, and then there's a transfer, maybe the holder in due course person gives a note as a gift, technically that wouldn't be a holder. They would just be a holder, not a holder in due course, but because the prior person was a holder in due course, they acquire the same rights. They don't become a holder in due course. They don't give them the holder in due course status, but they give them the rights, meaning that they are not subject to personal defenses. Basically, when you have your first holder in due course, it quote unquote washes the instrument, so that the holder thereafter can be a holder through a holder in due course. So if a holder in due course transfers a note to Shelton, who knew that the maker of the note has a personal defense, remember you're not supposed to know those things to become a holder in due course. You take without notice. Technically, Shelton is not a holder in due course. They're just going to be a holder because they know that there's this defense. But because that transfer is coming from a holder in due course, Shelton will have the same rights. And then if he transfers it to Bob, Bob technically is not going to be a holder in due course. Let's say he just gives it to Bob. It says Shelton gives to Bob. He won't be a holder, but Bob will still have holder in due course rights because through the chain it started out with a holder in due course. And then Pam, who acquires a check from payee, neither qualifies in this case as a holder in due course. So let's say Pam, and I'm telling you neither one of them is a holder in due course, and then Pam delivers the check to Quam, who does qualify to be a holder in due course. If Quam negotiates the check back to Pam, does she acquire holder in due course rights? No, she wouldn't. Her rights remain the same as those as a non-holder in due course. And that makes sense because then we would have all of this there'd be a loophole to be able to wash the instrument, so to speak. So if you were not, if you weren't prior, you can't transfer to holder in due course and then have it transfer back. That's an exception. And then we have discharge. Discharge from liability on a negotiable instrument in several ways. Obviously, when the note's paid, right? That's when it's all done and over. We can have payment on it. We can have it canceled. It can be by the parties; they would agree. The one who has the rights can surrender their rights. The parties can make an agreement to discharge it, or if there's a material alteration on it, that is going to discharge it too. But once primary party pays, all endorsers are discharged from any liabilities. Cancellation of the prior party's endorsements will discharge all those parties from liability. Any oral attempts to discharge are not effective, so it has to be done in writing. Intentional, let's say somebody just rips it up. I'm not paying this note, and they rip it up. Well, intentional destruction of an instrument by a holder does not discharge the parties unless the intent is to eliminate the obligation of the instrument. You can just rip it up, but if the intent was just to rip it up, it's not going to eliminate the obligation on the instrument. If it's a memorial to, oh, it's paid, and you rip it up, if the intent is that its obligation is full, then the obligation is full.